Hello and welcome to another stream of Frenchman Learns About the History of Japan. And yeah, this is the second one for the Sengoku Jidai, the Warring State period. It's the second of, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, I guess we'll see. We still have a lot to go. We've only watched a portion last time, so we have a lot to go through. But yeah, we're still gonna continue the series by the great channel, The Shogunate. We've watched the first 10 episodes last time, and now we're going to watch hopefully more than 10. I guess we'll see. I mean, as always, it depends on how long the episodes are, how much I have to say. You know, that's about it, really. But yeah, as always, you'll find the links to all the playlists of the Shogunate in the description. Yes, different playlists for different parts with all the videos you're watching. The link to my Discord if you want to follow me, my stream element, Patreon if you want to support me, request reaction. I also have a membership now, which, you have like a couple emotes that you can use if you join, as well as like 3 tiers with different amount of video reaction you can tell me to do every month. So if you're interested, take a look. But yeah, we're gonna continue with the Sengoku Jidai. I've learned a lot already last time. We had the rise of the Hojo, Uesugi, Takeda Shingen showed up even though he's still kind of young, and he did something pretty cool even though he wasn't too rewarded for it at first. It's a mess already, insane amount of clans fighting each other. Just, a proper civil war. I mean, I guess it's a civil war, right? Yeah. I didn't really think of it like that, but now that I think about it, it is a civil war, yeah. I mean, there's literally no, like, emperor government or shogunate really run anything at this point. Like, everybody's fighting for themselves. And again, even if you're a clan that, like, wants to stay on the side and just not really involve yourself with all of it, that's basically suicide. Like, you literally have to fight or you're going to get taken over. Neutrality is not really an option, yeah, like, I don't know. Like, others are trying to get bigger, so they're gonna swallow you up eventually. It's kind of how it is, yeah. Okay, well, I see the next episode is the arrival of European in Japan, which I actually didn't realize it was around this time. I thought it was maybe a little bit after. Yeah, I don't know. I guess not. I'm thinking of the show Shogun, which is in like 1600, I think, which is way after Sengoku Jidai. And in that show, it is already mentioned that here Japan has been trading with the Portuguese, I think, already for quite a bit, and the Dutch maybe. Yeah, I think so. Man, as always, I really stuck with dates. That's the biggest thing with me in history, really. You know what I mean? Like, dates I really don't do great. Yeah. Which is fine, I mean. I guess, it should be what interests you, right? So if I'm not interested in remembering dates, it is what it is. It's a subconscious kind of thing. Anyway, let's get into it. Episode 11 of the Sengoku Jidai.
In the last episode, we saw things begin to heat up in the west once again as the Amago clan invaded Aki province in attempts to destroy the Mori clan. However, an intervention by the Ochi clan saw to a renewed alliance between the Ochi and the Mori, who would later launch an attack on the Amago citadel of Gasan Toda. The attack would drastically fail, however, resulting in massive casualties and causing Ochi Yoshitaka to lose his taste for war. This would cause his retainer, Sue Harukata, to begin planning to seize power from his stagnant lord. Now, as we move into the 1540s, right in the midst of the...
He's still using like the Nobunaga ambition art, and actually after the last stream I kind of got interested into the Nobunaga ambition stream and I tried looking like which one to play. I think one that looked interesting was one from 10 years ago called something Sphere of Influence Ascension, I think, and it was saying that like that one compared to other game you can play as a single person. The other game are more like managing an empire. So I looked into that one. I haven't really decided yet to play it. It still looks like a very management kind of game, strategy kind of game, and it tends to be beyond me, I really don't think I have the brain for that kind of game, but I'm still kind of interested, like the time period is perfect for a game, right? So it makes you interested.
Sengoku Jidai, something completely unexpected would occur. Strange foreigners would begin arriving off.
I don't know what kind of cross that is. Well, I said something like a Templar cross, but I don't think so.
The shores of Kyushu. Europeans had found Japan.
And the rest is history. The shogunate. Always is it the shogunate. Sengoku Jidai. The arrival of the European in Japan.
It is easy to become comfortable with how things are, with how things have always been. Japan had only known its neighbors in Asia throughout its long history. Yet now, as the country was falling deeper and deeper into a chaotic period of war, foreigners from a land far beyond their known world would arrive on their shores, bringing with them new weapons and new ideas. Now, I'm going to do something I haven't done before. I'm going to hand things off here to my friend and colleague Ian.
Hello everyone, and thank you for having me.
I invited Ian to help me with this video because he not only was the person who suggested I start this channel, but also because we share a love for history. What Ian is here to do is dive into what was going on in Europe at this time, in particular with the Portuguese Empire leading up to their expansion into the Far East. So without...
I have so little knowledge about the Portuguese. Yeah. I know the Spanish Empire and, you know, it's somewhat similar. They're literally next to each other in the Iberian Peninsula, right? But, you know, I still assume there's a lot more different for the Portuguese, but I really have so little context. The only part of like Portuguese history I might know is around the time of the Napoleonic Wars, right? Like when they get invaded and the wars of the peninsula, that's about it. That's probably about it. And I guess World War II a little bit.
Further ado, here he is to help explain Europe's arrival in Japan.
In the wake of a great storm, among the wreckage of a Canton trade vessel, on the beaches of Tanegashima, lie strange men, the likes of which had never before been seen in Japan. Who were they, and how did they get here? In order to understand who these strange foreigners were, we first need to look beyond Japan and examine the world of the Portuguese. In the wake of the Black Death, much of Europe remained depopulated and in shambles. With such a reduction in the European population, it goes without saying that the demand for exotic wares and commodities was significantly less than what it had been. In the early half of the 1400s, only a few links remained between Europe and the Far East, such as the Italian states of Genoa and Venice, who remained as intermediary traders with Muslim Egypt. It was Portugal's ambition to cut out the middlemen and establish direct routes between Europe and the Far East. However, being a relatively small, poor country situated in the far southwest corner of Europe, it seemed unlikely that Portugal would become the next great epicenter of global trade and exploration.
Yeah,
That is,
makes sense.
until the reign of Prince Henry the Navigator. During his reign, the Portuguese prince set out to establish a proper seafaring tradition in Portugal, which formed the catalyst that would propel the Portuguese advancements in mapmaking, navigation, and shipbuilding. By doing so, Prince Henry laid the groundwork that would allow the great Portuguese explorers such as Vasco da Gama, Bartholomew Diaz, and Alfonso Albuquerque.
Vasco da Gama is a name that I only know because I just remember it from school, but I don't remember anything that is done. I just kind of remember that, like, you know, I had to memorize it for some test, history test, I guess, but I just can't tell you what he did. Yeah, I guess a lot of school history knowledge, well, a lot of school stuff is like this, right? I mean, forced to remember it because you're told to remember it, but you don't really, you're not really interested at the time, so, you know, you kind of forget the details.
To uncover those routes to the Far East and establish one of the greatest overseas empires of its time. First on the Gold Coast of Africa, then around the Cape of Good Hope and along the East African coast.
Oh, so they went this way, not, you know, the other way. They didn't go west, okay. That's a crazy long voyage then. I mean, it's still probably a long voyage going west to Japan, but yeah.
India, the Spice Islands, and China. The Portuguese trade system centered around the establishment of feitorias, a series of fortified trade outposts constructed to conduct trade and protect Portuguese interests. Among the numerous feitorias established across Asia and the Far East, several ports of interest became critically important to Portugal's success, those being the ports of Aden, Goa, Malacca, Orbaz, and in the late 1550s, the settlement of
The Hormuz Strait, where I've heard that before, especially right now.
Macau in southern China.
Oh yeah, that's right. Don't they, like, is Macau Portuguese until, if I'm not crazy, until like the 1990s or something? Until like it's given back, in the same way the British gave back Hong Kong to China. Yeah, that's a long time.
All of which formed the route by which Portuguese traders would embark on multi-year trade voyages. Among the exotic and unusual commodities that could be found across Asia, spices were the thing that Portugal sought most, not for the sake of luxury, but out of great necessity. In Europe, the demand for spice became the driving factor of the Portuguese endeavor, particularly the demand of southern Europe, because of the need to preserve food and make it more palatable. Yet herein lied the problem. The Portuguese had neither the goods nor the mechanisms to trade for Asian spice, till it was realized that China had an insatiable appetite for silver. Realizing that by conducting inter-Asia trade to then buy silver to trade with China, Portugal could utilize the full extent of its empire to acquire as much silver as it could to trade for Chinese spice and other valuable goods to send home to Europe. Thus,
doesn't sound like a great deal on paper, but I guess spice was a lot more, well, it was really rare in Europe and expensive, but silver for spice is kind of crazy.
Portugal began the process of sending enormous trade fleets to Asia to conduct these massive trade expeditions. Starting in Goa, the Portuguese vessels would bring with them a wealth of European goods. Continuing to other ports in India, they would acquire Indian goods such as gems, cinnamon, and pepper. Continuing on to Malacca and the Spice Islands, where they would stay for up to a year, waiting out the typhoon season and trading for aromatic woods and exotic animal hides. From Malacca, the traders would sail across the South China Sea to Macau to trade for silk and other Chinese goods. By the time the...
Man, this is crazy, the journey, like it takes years and all of the stuff they must encounter along the way. This would make some great TV show, like some kind of historical TV show. This could make a great TV show, yeah.
Portuguese had established their trade in the Far East. They began to realize the importance of this island nation known as Japan. Before now, the Portuguese had only known of Japan's existence through vague, second-hand reports from Marco Polo's expedition to the Far East in the 1270s. Japan was a land often known for its incessant piracy that had plagued the surrounding seas for years. However, it was common knowledge that Japan was home to a wealth of silver and other precious metals. Thus, the discovery of Japan was vital to the continued success of the Portuguese trade in the Far East. Yet, not knowing its exact location proved a conundrum in itself. As fate would have it, in 1543, trader and explorer Antonio Mota's ship would be hit by a devastating storm, pulling them far off their initial course, resulting in the ship making landfall on an unknown island.
This island was Tanegashima, off of the southern coast of Kyushu. Tanegashima was ruled by the Lord Tanegashima Tokitaka, who was a retainer of the Shimazu clan.
Man, of all the time to end up in Japan, I mean, sure, there was a lot of pirates before, but, despite, the Onin War, the Genpei War, the Genrokunen War, etc., like, it was still not that bad. But all the time to finally discover Japan is in the middle of, like, the deadliest war, where, like, every piece of the land is contested between clans. That's kind of a crazy time to end up here.
Just north in Satsuma province. These foreigners intrigued Tokitaka, as their likes had never been seen before in Japan. But what truly caught his eye, however, were the arquebus guns these foreigners carried. Previously, Japan had known of crude firearms through their trade with
I was gonna say, doesn't China already have guns?
China. However, these Chinese guns were not widely seen as reliable or effective. Upon seeing a demonstration of these new firearms, Tokitaka knew these were special. Initially, he attempted to have his master blacksmith emulate the design of the weapon, but to no avail. Eager to learn the secrets of these new weapons, Tokitaka sent his daughter to be with the foreigners so that he would be able to learn the secrets behind the construction of the firearms from her. Regardless, Tokitaka...
I mean, the guy probably doesn't know, right? It's kind of like when I drive a car, I don't really understand the mechanism of everything, you know? I get the concept, you know, but I can't tell you how it really works. I'm just some guy.
Would have to wait until 1 year later.
Also, why are they so sick? Why are they dummy sick but only at the bottom? Like, big ass thighs, big ass ass. We're Portuguese, like, built like a Oompa Loompa.
When Moda returned with skilled gun makers who were better able to teach the Japanese the proper skills of the trade. Thus, these new guns that were being produced on the island would come to simply be known as Tanegashima. In time, they would spread throughout Japan, and as more and more smiths began producing them across the country, the name of these weapons gradually shifted from Tanegashima to Teppo. Eventually, the Japanese would begin to refine and improve on the Portuguese designs, improving methods of manufacturing and solving problems that would take the empires of Europe decades to resolve. As more and more daimyo and samurai began finally getting their hands on...
As always, in the middle of war, you know, technological development always so damn fast.
On Teppo, their use began to expand across the battlefield. However, discovering how to properly implement them was still under much debate. It would be 30 more years before Teppo would finally be introduced in a manner that would truly change the face of warfare in Japan. However, now the Japanese would be forced to face an influx of Jesuit missionaries who had been previously operating throughout the Far East, spreading the word of the Lord and converting the peoples of Asia. Although, now with the recent discovery of Japan, it was only a matter of time before they made their way to the shores of Kyushu.
The first major introduction of Christianity to Japan came through the famous missionary Francis Xavier in 1549. Traveling to the Shimazu-controlled territory of Satsuma, where they were welcomed with open arms, most likely due to the idea that creating friendly ties with the missionaries may lead to greater trade opportunities with the Portuguese. Of course, this only worked to further the spread of Christianity throughout the country. In time, as more missionaries began arriving in the country, many daimyo welcomed them into their homes, as having accepted a missionary's presence became a status symbol for some lords. However, this was not the case everywhere, as there were still many daimyo who viewed these men with hostility and their influence as toxic to Japanese ways.
In the Sengoku Jidai mode of Mountain Blade Bannerlord, Soku that I talked about many times, you know, you take quests from different, you know, people in towns and village, and one of the quests usually tends to be some village who was some kind of preacher, Christian preacher, and you know, the village is not very happy about it, and the quest has like multiple options of like, either you can kill him, you can try to convince him to leave, and then bring him safely to a port. It is one of the missions that you can do.
Although Francis Xavier's initial mission to Japan may have been one of simply spreading the word of the Lord and conversion of the Japanese people, eventually missionary work in Japan began to take a more political form, as their presence transformed into a conduit of Western influence. In the coming decades, more Europeans would come to Japan in search of trade and riches, most notably the Dutch. This new concept,
Shogun, watch Shogun, it's such a good show.
the foreign empires of the West, would forever change the future of Japan.
So, what have we learned? The Portuguese...
I guess I'll pause the recap part, you know, I'll pass like we did last time. I think we got the gist of it. Very interesting, makes me want to learn about Portugal some more. I mean, you know, I could say that about endless some other countries that I know too little about, right? And yet my main obsession is Japan, you know. As I said before, maybe eventually when I've done like 300 streams of about Japan and so many different subjects. Maybe, I'll do some other countries. I don't think anytime soon, though. There's still so much I want to learn. Anyway, great episode. Very interesting. Very interesting. And again, what a time to arrive in Japan. I'm kind of surprised that, not one foreigner made it to Japan before. Or is it more like, this time it's a big deal because it was like official representative of a country? There must have been some other like European making it to Japan before this, but it was just like one person and not a big deal, I assume. But I wonder if there's any interesting stories of that. Yeah. Episode 12. I guess we can pass the intro as well. Upsets in the East.
By the year 1540, 3 years prior to the arrival of the Portuguese, a major development would occur within the Takeda clan of Kai province. Previously, in episode 8, we had seen how the Takeda clan, under the warmongering daimyo Takeda Nobutora, had entered into an alliance by marriage with the Imagawa clan to the south in Suruga province. This would allow Nobutora to continue invading neighboring provinces, entering into arduous campaigns that often yielded very little ground. These campaigns also put great strain on the common people who lived under Takeda rule, as they often were subject to increased taxes and forced labor in order to sustain Nobutora's many campaigns. It is here that his son, Takeda Harunobu, later known as Shingen, would begin making a name for himself, showcasing his brilliant strategic mind and valor, particularly in the siege of Unokuchi in 1536. However, even with Harunobu's military achievements, he was often scorned and neglected by his father Nobutora. It is known that Nobutora much preferred his second son, Nobushige, and even intended Nobushige to inherit leadership of the clan rather than Harunobu. Although that was not meant to be. Nobutora's incessant warring was a threat to all the lords of East Central Honshu, putting great tension and strain over the clan and its political relations.
Are they gonna ally and try to take down the Takeda?
In the past, a coalition of clans throughout Shinano province had united in attempts to destroy the Takeda clan. Thus, fear among many Takeda retainers arose for the clan's future and survival should a greater coalition arise to put an end to the clan and to Nobutora's warmongering ways. What transpired in 1540 is often under much debate to historians, as suddenly Harunobu would rebel against his father. Conflicting accounts put the actual events of the rebellion under vastly different circumstances. However, looking at what remains the same between both accounts can give us a clearer depiction of why the rebellion occurred. To start off,
I'm guessing from what we've seen is that Shingen, later Shingen, was thinking that his father was gonna destroy the clan by, the way he was leading it. Yeah, like eventually he's gonna piss off everybody and all the other clan are gonna fight the Takeda and they just will be destroyed.
Many of Nobutora's top generals and commanders actually viewed Harunobu as a gifted and heroic leader, following his actions at Unokuchi. Thus, many of these samurai found it easy to betray Nobutora in favor of Harunobu. However, it is unknown whether it was Harunobu's initial intention to rebel, or rather if he was persuaded to by many of the top-ranking Takeda retainers. It can be assumed, though, that due to rumors surrounding Nobutora's plan to make Nobushige the next head of the Takeda clan, Harunobu may have most likely jumped at the opportunity to take power before that came to pass. Lastly, it is also widely suspected in both accounts that Imagawa Yoshimoto may have had a hand to play in the removal of Nobutora.
You could say he looks like a schemer, yeah, you could say that.
Remember that both clans were allies, yet Nobutora's aggressive behavior put much strain on their relationship, making it plausible that Yoshimoto would seek to no longer worry about his belligerent father-in-law. Whatever the case being, It is known that Harunobu's rebellion was largely a bloodless one, as Nobutora angrily accepted his removal from power and went into exile in the Imagawa province of Suruga. Interestingly enough, Harunobu's younger brother Nobushige would be largely uninvolved in the rebellion, and in time would come to be a trusted commander under Harunobu.
That makes sense, because I was gonna say the name Nobushige sounds very familiar. Yeah, might be Samurai Warriors. I guess when you play, stuff relating to the Takeda is there.
Now, with Harunobu in charge of the Takeda clan, he began shifting his efforts to a more coordinated and well-thought-out invasion of Shinano province. It would be roughly 10 more years before Harunobu would adopt his more famous name, Shingen. However, into the mid-1540s, as Harunobu was now steadily making his way into Shinano, another struggle would arise back in the Kanto region. After the death of Hojo Ujitsuna in 1541, Uesugi Tomosara, daimyo of the ailing Ogegetsu branch of the Uesugi clan, attempted to regain lost territory from the mighty Hojo clan. His first endeavor was at Edo, where he failed to retake the important castle on the Kanto plain. Yet, in 1545 he would try his luck again, this time at Kawagoe in central Musashi province. Out of great desperation to strike a great blow against the growing power of the Hojo, Tomosara would be joined by forces under the Yamanochi branch of the Uesugi, and also the remaining Koga Ashikaga under Ashikaga Haruuji. Their combined army totaled to roughly 85,000 strong, vastly outnumbering the 3,000 defenders of Kawagoe Castle under the command of Hojo Tsunenari.
Okay, that's a bit fucked up. I mean, you do always need bigger numbers as the attacker when you're attacking a castle, but okay, that's maybe a bit too much. I don't think you needed that much, but fair enough. At this point, you can literally climb into the castle like in World War Z, the zombies climbing on top of each other and, making a massive pile of human bodies. You can just climb into the castle like this, no need for siege towers or any kind of ladders. I don't think they had siege towers in Japan warfare.
Yet, Tsunenari held firm in the face of overwhelming enemies,
Really?
awaiting reinforcements to arrive to break the siege. As the attackers settled in for what they expected would be a short-lived resistance by Tsunenari, they would never expect what was to come. Hojo
Really?
Fujiyasu, the new daimyo of the Hojo clan, marched out from Odawara with an army numbering around 8,000. Not nearly enough to defeat the Uesugi Ashikaga army in the open field, but enough to enact a master plan. Arriving at Kawagoe, Ujiyasu managed to sneak a messenger inside of the fortress to reveal his strategy to Tsunenari. Both Ujiyasu's forces and the garrison at Kawagoe would launch a night attack upon the unsuspecting Uesugi Ashikaga army. However, in order to guarantee success, Ujiyasu ordered his soldiers to not wear armor so that their...
I mean, even if you do a night attack, it's still like 12,000 versus 80,000. How is this gonna work?
Their mobility could be more swift. And most importantly, there was to be no taking of enemy heads. Without the taking of heads, there would be no gaining of honor or renown among the Hojo ranks. But it also ensured a more aggressive and rapid attack. Remarkably, the Hojo soldiers would display their immense loyalty to their lord and agree to take no enemy heads.
It sounds suicidal.
Ujiyasu's scheme would pay off, as when both forces stormed the Uesugi Ashikaga positions, they were caught completely off guard. And due to the intense mobility of the Hojo army, they were able to easily break and rout their disoriented foe. The crushing defeat of the Uesugi would spell doom for both branches of the clan, with the Ogegetsu simply being wiped out completely.
That's insane.
Hojo control over Kanto was now essentially confirmed. Infighting and rebellion began to break out in the remaining Uesugi families, which already were suffering from weak stability. Often, the Nagao clan would be called forth by the Uesugi to aid in putting down revolts and unrest. Thus, the Uesugi were able to endure for some time. Up until 1543,
When does Kenshin come in?
the Nagao clan had been ruled by the headstrong Nagao Tamekage. However, he would meet his end fighting against an army of Iko-Iki radicals.
Wow. It's still crazy seeing this kind of out, just wild monks. I mean, it's really something. Yeah. Again, like in other culture, you have like warrior priests and warrior, what do you call it? Like warrior followers of God, right? But they tend to be much more, in terms of looks, look much more like a normal armor and a normal warrior, right? It just feels so weird to see like the monks just like this. Let me see, we can see they're still wearing some armor under the monk style clothes, but it's still something. Yeah, it's really unusual.
In Kaga province, placing the Nagao clan in the hands of his eldest son, Harukage. Unfortunately, Harukage would often fall ill and showed little aptitude for leadership. His feeble position atop the clan would in time bring its survival into question. After the Hojo victory at Kawagoe in 1545 that led to the destruction of the Ogegeyatsu Uesugi, unrest within the Uesugi clan was seen higher than ever before. As stated previously, this caused the Nagao clan to become heavily involved in fighting against rebels, leading to one samurai becoming renowned for his talent on the battlefield. This was Harukage's younger brother, Nagao Kagetora, who in his late teenage years was commanding armies in defense of the shattering Uesugi clan. Other top Nagao clan commanders and retainers agreed that if the Nagao clan was to maintain its position of strength, Harukage needed to be replaced by Kagetora.
See, this is such a great evolution from the earlier videos about the different period, you know? The evolution of simply choosing the ruler because of blood and, you know, stuff like that, right? Even if, you know, they're a kid, even if they're not like fit for like ruling, like we're just seeing this with the Takeda, we're just seeing this with I guess this guy. We're finally in a much more like meritocracy kind of part of Japan, and obviously I know that eventually it kind of reverts a little bit. The whole thing of nobility doesn't really fully go away, but it's kind of a, you know, a nice time in terms of like, you know, if you really like show what you're capable of, you have much more chance of actually, you know, being the one in charge. Yeah, that's maybe one of the positives of the Sengoku Jidai, maybe.
Thus, Harukage would be confronted by these higher-ranking samurai, who each pleaded with him to step down in exchange for his brother's ascension to lordship of the clan. Initially, Harukage would dismiss them, yet eventually he would reluctantly agree. And by 1547, Kagetora had secured control of the Nagao clan. Several years later, in 1551, Uesugi Norimasa, daimyo of the fragile Yamanochi Uesugi, would suffer yet another defeat from Hojo Ujiyasu. This would force him to flee north to seek refuge with the now much stronger Nagao clan at their stronghold in Kasagayama. It is here that Kagetora would unleash a political masterstroke. Knowing full well that the Uesugi clan could not survive under their current condition, Kagetora convinced Norimasa to name him the Lord of Echigo, Kanrei of Kanto, even though the Uesugi no longer had full control over Kanto, and to adopt him into the Uesugi family.
Wait, so is he Kenshin?
Kagetora the immediate heir to the Uesugi clan. Seeing no other choice, Norimasa accepted. Thus, Nagao Kagetora became Uesugi Kagetora. In time, Uesugi Kagetora would increase his status as a religious man and eventually change his name to Uesugi Kenshin, the legendary samurai commander who would one day come to rule the Uesugi clan and clash with his greatest rival, Takeda Shingen.
Doomed Yaoi. Let's go.
So, what can we learn?
Good stuff, okay, damn. I was gonna say, like, man, the Uesugi are losing so much. When does Kenshin even come in? Since, as I said before, like, I like Kenshin because of gender bender version, not because of the history, because I literally don't know the history of what Kenshin did or anything. Here we go. Yes, come on. Man, Japan really loves changing name. I talked about it before, and it's something I personally don't like too much because it becomes kind of complicated to keep up, you know. Already, like, remembering historical figure is, like, not that easy, but especially when they keep changing name. I'm a fan of sumo. Some of you guys may know I've been watching for like 6-7 years now. And, wrestlers change name pretty often. Even at the top, even when they've been there for years. Right now I could say, like, you've got Kirishima used to be known as Kiribayama. Usually it's like when they achieve a big rank, they might change name. Sometimes after their master, their father, their grandpa. There's always some significance to it. But it's really like, as a fan, it's not, it does get a bit old when everybody does it. Kotonwaka into Kotozakura. It's just one of those things where, like, I understand its tradition, I understand, there's meaning to it, but, yeah. It just feels like a bit much trying to remember all the different names when they keep changing.
In 1540, the aggressive Takeda Nobutora would be ousted by his son, Harunobu, who would more...
I guess we can pass the recap. Huh? Okay, well, great stuff. Both Kenshin and Shingen, Aya. Top of my head, the three names that I know the most is Oda Nobunaga, Takeda Shingen, and Uesugi Kenshin. To me, they're like the most important, at least for like most of the Sengoku Jidai. We'll see if there's anybody else of relevance. I'm sure there is, Next, the Battle of Miyajima. An island. Miyajima.
By the mid-1500s, we can easily see just how drastically and rapidly the map of Japan was changing throughout the chaotic warring years of the Sengoku Jidai, as clans across the country fought endlessly for regional dominance. Some clans came from nothing, yet would in time rise to greatness. Other clans had previously been mighty, yet had in time been subject to a sad and slow decline. Two of the most notable falls from grace being the Yamana and Hosokawa clans, both of which being responsible for the Onin War, which kickstarted Japan's warring states period almost a century prior. We have already seen how these two once great clans had shrunk over time.
I know it's kind of unrelated, well, it is kind of related, but it's been a long time by this point, right? But I wonder if, like, there's any remnant of the Taira clan and Minamoto from the end of AN, the like kind of the first two big samurai families, I guess. Or I guess they're not here for this showdown of samurai families.
And once again, another rupture was to occur. This time,
but the Taira were kind of destroyed.
Clan, Miyoshi Nagayushi, retainer of the Hosokawa clan, had used the last several years to grow the power and influence of his family, and finally, by 1548, he would ultimately cut ties with the Hosokawa. Without the will to bring them back into the fold, the influence of the Hosokawa can now be observed in full decline, as their formerly owned territories began to drift out of their direct control. Though the Hosokawa family would live on, their clan would never again hold the level of prominence it once did in its heyday. Yet, as the Hosokawa fell apart...
I feel like I know this song. Let's see the credits. Music from Zoku by Kodo, Samurai Warrior 2 Empires, Koei Tenko, yeah. Okay, it's some Koei Tempo music. One in Glory and Sword in Flame, okay. Okay. Makes sense, why it's so good. Makes sense. I think the only Samurai Warriors I've actually played is Spirito Sanada, which is one of the recent ones, but I know people say 2 and 4 are the best one, I think. Now I kind of want to play Samurai Warriors. I'm kind of waiting for 6. Yeah, kind of waiting for the next one. In the end, as much as I like the Warriors game, you know, I'm not dying to them that I play every single one of them because they all kind of feel the same. Even like if you play, I don't know, like if you talk about Dynasty Warriors, you play 7 and then you play, you know, one of the recent one, it still doesn't feel that different. So I like to wait a lot between release.
So too did another former regional power in the West, the Ochi clan. In episode 10, The Siege of Gasantora, we witnessed the Ochi and Mori clan defeated when they attempted to seize the Amago clan citadel of Gasantora.
It was crazy.
This caused the Ochi daimyo, Ochi Yoshitaka, to completely forsake war and instead divert his attention to the blossoming of culture and arts in Yamaguchi. This infuriated his warmongering retainer, Sue Harukata, along with other retainers. Eventually, in 1551, Sue Harukata would initiate a military coup, surrounding Yoshitaka and forcing him to commit seppuku. Harukata then placed a puppet daimyo, Ochi Yoshinaga, at the head of the clan. Yet really, the Ochi were now firmly in the grip of Harukata.
Alright.
Immediately, tension flared up between Mori Motonari of neighboring Aki province and Harukata, as Motonari had been an ally of Yoshitaka prior to his death at the hands of Harukata. Within 3 years, by 1554, the two clans would go to war with one another. The first time the two armies would clash would be at Oshikihata, within the Mori territory of Aki. Although the Ochi force numbered twice that of the Mori, Motonari's skillful leadership and knowledge of his own terrain, coupled with the fact that he bribed many of the Ochi samurai to join his side, allowed him to defeat and rout Harukata's army. Yet this battle was only a prelude for what was.
Why does the subtitles don't put themselves on? I keep activating them.
To come. Motonari had drawn the first blood in their conflict, causing Harukata to eagerly plan out a strategy for revenge against the Mori. However, this was exactly what Motonari had hoped for. Knowing that Harukata would jump at the chance to strike back against Motonari, 1 year later, in 1555, Motonari ordered the construction of a fort on the holy island of Miyajima. Although it was then that Motonari abandoned the fort, and made sure that its abandonment was a very well-known fact, publicly lamenting that he could only hope to hold it for so long. Once Harukata learned that the island stronghold had been left empty, he immediately launched an army 20,000 strong to secure it.
Does he want to trap the army inside the castle and besiege them?
As gaining control of it would allow for a more coordinated invasion of Aki, Motonari simply offered little resistance and allowed Harukata to push into Aki province and to secure the island of Miyajima. However, this is where Motonari's grand plan would come into fruition. A Mori force around 10,000 strong assaulted and retook the castle of Sakurao, an essential link to Miyajima, thus cutting the supply line to the island off from the mainland.
Can't they resupply from a bunch of other places?
Motonari then bided his time until a thunderstorm erupted overhead, allowing his army to have good cover for their final attack, calling upon his naval ally Murakami Torayoshi to aid in ferrying his men across Miyajima. Motonari and his sons Mori Takamoto and Kikawa Motoharu landed to the east, while his third son Kobayakawa Takakage landed to the north of the island. At dawn, the Mori forces would launch a two-pronged assault on the unsuspecting Ochi army.
Maybe there won't be a siege? I mean, the guy built the castle, so he might have, accounted for like a easy way to get in. Oh no, it's just a field battle?
Was joined, Harukata's force would be completely annihilated by the Mori.
Wait, I thought they were in a castle. I'm confused.
With Harukata himself committing seppuku in defeat. The death
Well.
of Sue Harukata sent shockwaves across the west as the Ochi clan reeled in the
Impressive.
wake of the Battle of Miyajima. Now, with the Ochi clan drastically weakened, Motonari would spend the next 2 years devouring their territory, while the Otomo clan worked to secure Buzin on the island of Kyushu. Finally, by 1557, after the suicide of Ochi Yoshinaga, the Mori clan would secure both Nagato and Suo provinces, thus
Respect.
reigning supreme over western Honshu.
That was very smooth. This guy is pretty damn good. Yeah. I may have underestimated him with the name Mori, you know. I kept thinking of Mori Kogoro and, you know, I thought this guy wasn't very smart maybe, but he was
Having
smart.
established a true regional power, Motonari retired in favor of his son, Takamoto, that same year.
Hopefully the son is good.
Although he would largely retain much authority within the clan until his death in 1571. So, what can we learn?
Alright, man. Well, here's a good example of like someone I haven't heard of. Pretty damn smart. Yeah, I'm still a bit confused because why were they not in the castle? Why did the battle happen on open field? I'm a bit confused on that part, but nonetheless, great plan. Kind of crazy though, you know, like willing to construct a whole castle to bait the enemy. Kind of good. Obviously, we know that at this time, you know, the samurai nobility mentality is already in strong effect, and so I guess a lot of lords, it's less that they are dumb, it's more that they are like stuck with some kind of honors and stuff like that, right? So like they wouldn't really do too much stuff like this, you know, kind of like for example, like willing to retreat to kind of bait the enemy and stuff like that. They wouldn't really be willing to do that. So I think the one that are willing to do it are kind of the one who, of course, will come out on top, right? You might say it's like dishonorable or something, but it won the battle very convincingly. Well, the war, I guess. Yeah. Okay, great stuff. Next episode. Oh, Oda Nobunaga. It's time. It's time. We've made it. We have made it. Just give me a quick second. I'm looking at something because I get a VPN for a few days for the first time, and I just want to make sure that things are working fine. I think it's fine. Yeah. Okay.
In the last episode,
Sengoku Jidai. Oda Nobunaga in the war in Owari. He's
throughout the
coming.
previous few decades, we have witnessed constant war in the east, as major samurai clans, such as the Imagawa, Takeda, Hojo, and Uesugi, all fought over regional power. Yet, just to the west, there exists another clan we have only touched on once so far throughout this series, that being the Oda clan of
Very small.
Owari province. The Oda family was an old one, claiming descent all the way back from the Taira clan, which, as you remember from the Setting the Stage series,
Well, that explains. Damn, my question was answered. So the Taira are basically the Oda. Holy shit, okay. Okay. Well, that explains then why they're gonna be so good. It's in the blood, huh? It's in the blood. Even though the Taira kind of got annihilated back then, right? And, you know, there was a lot of mistake. They were still pretty damn great for a long time, you know? Before you do it all.
was snuffed out after the end of the Genpei War in 1185. The Oda, however, lived on, and by 1550 was under the leadership of the minor daimyo Oda Nobuhide. Like any other daimyo of the age, Nobuhide constantly found himself at war with his neighbors, mostly coming into conflict with the Saito of Mino province to the north, along with the Matsudaira and Imagawa clans to the east. Nobuhide was seen as a brave and competent leader, and even though he constantly found himself at war, he is not remembered as rash or foolhardy as another one of his contemporaries, Takeda Nobutora, the father of Shingen. It can be noted, however, that Nobuhide and Saito Dosan, known as the Viper of Mino, who had previously stolen the province away from the Toki clan, would eventually come to a formal peace in 1548 that saw Dosan's daughter married to Nobuhide's eldest legitimate son, Nobunaga.
I love the contrast between the ikemen art of the game and then for the woman it's like, you know, the old classic, very funny looking art.
Nobunaga can immediately be seen as an extremely interesting figure. From the get-go, we can see that throughout Nobunaga's youth, he had been extremely interested with Western trade and ideas, along with Western firearms. However, he was also seen as brash, rude, and often on the borderline of disgraceful. It was from his antics and behavior that he earned the nickname, the Fool of Owari. By 1551, Nobuhide would die, leaving Owari in the hands of his illegitimate son, Nobuhiro. However, all eyes were on Nobunaga, whose troublesome conduct would all come to a head at his father's funeral, where he was observed acting with complete dishonor. This would prompt Nobuhide's loyal old retainer and Nobunaga's would-be mentor, Hirate Kiyohide, to commit suicide in attempts to bring Nobunaga to his wits and away from such reckless behavior. And to this end, Kiyohide was...
That's a crazy way to do it. I'm gonna kill myself and hopefully you'll be less of a fool. Interesting logic.
Successful, as in the aftermath of his death, Nobunaga appears to have shaped up. However, trouble was...
I mean, okay, I guess, yeah, like, if someone kills themselves and they tell me I killed myself because you were too dumb, so please, not I kill myself, be less dumb, I guess I'd make an effort, yeah. I guess if, you know, it's someone you care about, it would kind of make you, you know, it might be a wake-up call, yeah.
Still brewing within the clan, as many splinter groups emerged not willing to follow the Fool of Owari or the illegitimate Nobuhiro. This fractured the Oda clan in the wake of Nobuhide's death. With Owari fully engulfed in the flames of war, Nobunaga set out to reunify his shattered province. Due to his illegitimate status, Nobuhiro was quickly forced to submit to Nobunaga, as he was unable to truly gather any real following. And as the years went on, it would be seen that Nobunaga did actually possess the true capacity to lead, as by 1556, he had for the most part defeated the rest of his rivals in Owari. Yet that's...
I keep saying it, but it's crazy that not only all of the big clans are fighting each other over like piece of land, but even within the clan themselves, there's like civil war, like there's like clan wars inside the civil war, inside the country war. It's just like insane, the level of conflict, you know?
Same year, another internal power struggle would break out in Mino, as Nobunaga's father-in-law, Saito Dosan, came under attack from his own son, Saito Yoshitatsu. Nobunaga immediately sent forces to aid Dosan. Unfortunately, they would never reach him in time, as the Battle of Nagaragawa would see the death of Dosan and Yoshitatsu assuming full control over the Saito clan. Yoshitatsu would quickly establish himself as an enemy of Nobunaga, as he would begin conspiring with the illegitimate Nobuhiro to seize power away from Nobunaga. These talks did not come far, however, as Nobunaga would catch wind of his brother's actions and put an end to the conspiring, even going so far as to pardon Nobuhiro. However, Nobuhiro was not the only brother to oppose Nobunaga, as we can see 1 year later in 1557, Oda Nobuyuki would also begin conspiring against Nobunaga, this time turning to the top Oda retainers.
Oh, the Shibata, yeah. Oh, I still forgot about the Shibata. Shibata Katsui, yeah, I know him.
Hayashi Michikatsu and Shibata Katsuie for aid, resulting in the Battle of Ino, where Nobunaga would emerge victorious, while forgiving his brother for his failed attempt at rebellion.
Like again, as stupid as it is, I know so many of these names from another game of all things, Sengoku rounds as I keep talking about, right? Shibata Katsuie, I think, is one of the few characters who's not actually gender banned. He's actually a guy in that one. Yeah, Kenshin and many others are gender banned, but not him. I think it's also like, well, Oda Nobunaga is also not gender banned, but he's also like kind of the main villain, I guess. Yeah. I know the names, but again, from that game I definitely don't know the actual story. Yeah, I guess that's the case. I mean, except if in the story, someone named Rance banged half of those guys, which are actually girls, I guess. Then that's probably accurate.
Yet, Nobuyuki's insurrection would not end there, as he soon began scheming to take power once again. In time, Nobunaga would catch wind of this betrayal as well. Yet this time, he would be much less forgiving, sending an army under the command of Ikeda Tsuneoki to crush his brother. Nobuyuki and his garrison at Suemori Castle would be defeated, resulting in Nobuyuki's death. Although Nobunaga would once again find it in himself to pardon Michikatsu and Katsuie, in a way of sending a message to the other Oda retainers that he was now the dominant force in the province, as both of them would go on to serve him loyally in the years to come.
I guess it's smart, yeah, it's not a bad way to gain some loyalty. I mean, it's probably what helps him eventually conquer Alpha Japan.
By 1558, Nobunaga was unchallenged, and Owari was firmly under his rule. Yet the past 7 years of civil war had taken their toll, as the Oda clan now sat between two powerful enemies. The hostile Saito to the north, now under the reign of Yoshitatsu, and the powerful Imagawa to the east, along with their Matsudaira allies, all.
Which is the blue one in between the Oda and Matsudaira?
Under the sway of the mighty Imagawa Yoshimoto. In the coming years, Nobunaga would once again be called forth to prove himself, or let the Oda clan be wiped off the face of the map.
Let's go.
So,
alright, things are getting real. I mean, we've got most of the major players now, even Oda Nobunaga at this point, so yeah. Definitely, out of all the ones we've listed so far, Oda Nobunaga, I would say I know the most, which is still like little, right? I just know that he was, known as a ruthless commander, that he adopted guns into his tactic quite a bit, that he conquered Alpha Japan before being betrayed, which is a shame because we see early on already, like, he had to deal with multiple people trying to betray him, but I guess that never ends, right? I just know he gets betrayed eventually. Is it Toyotomi that betrays him? I think so. And then that guy gets betrayed or something. And then I think it's Hideyoshi that finished conquering Japan, right? Yeah, I don't really think I know much more than that about Nobunaga, just that he was a great commander and that he conquered half of the country. I mean, I guess he was probably the best commanders of the time. No? I mean, we'll see what happens. Yeah. I still feel like I'm lacking some knowledge. You know what? A bit early, but I'm gonna take a quick break before I continue. I need to go to the bathroom, so it is what it is. So give me 5 minutes. I'll be back and we continue. Okay, I'm back. Sorry for the wait. Feels better. Okay, well, let us continue to learn the road to Kawanakajima, another island. What are we gonna do on the island this time? Let's see.
Throughout this series thus far, as we have made our way through the warring years of the Sengoku Jidai, we have witnessed many major battles occur in the east. Yet none so far have been so massive and legendary as the clash that would erupt between the armies of Takeda Shingen and Uesugi Kenshin upon the plain of Kawanakajima. However, to understand the origins of this great struggle, we must first examine Takeda Shingen's decade-long invasion of Shinano province, in which the Battle of Kawanakajima can be seen as a direct result. Therefore, this episode will not be so much about Uesugi Kenshin, but instead about Shingen's warpath that would eventually lead the two into conflict. Back in the 12th episode of this series, Upsets in the East, we saw how in the early 1540s, Takeda Shingen, at that point still known as Haranobu, overthrew his father Takeda Nobutora and seized control of the Takeda clan. As we remember, Nobutora had waged constant war against many clans in neighboring Shinano province, yet ultimately gaining little to no ground and causing his own province of Kai to suffer due to his military campaigns. When Haranobu took power, he too sought to invade Shinano, whose many lords were still hostile, even forming coalitions against the Takeda in years past. Yet Haranobu would go about his invasion in a much more calculated manner than his father ever had. Haranobu's first goal was the invasion of the Suwa Valley, lorded over by Suwa Yorishige, who was actually Haranobu's brother-in-law. Beginning in 1542, Haranobu used a political conflict between two shrines in the valley as a reason to intervene. However, when his army came marching, the clans of Shinano quickly banded together once again to form an army in opposition of Haranobu's advance. These clans included the Suwa, Ogasawara, Murakami, and Kiso. Using his wit, Haranobu entrenched himself at a defensive position at Fuchu in Kai province. He then ordered the widening of his moat and the raising of his walls, all to strengthen his fortified position. Yet, he went so far as to make this fact public, so that when word of it reached the coalition lords, they immediately took it as cowardice and rushed headforth to crush Haranobu.
Okay. Is it cowardice to make your castle stronger? Sometimes I'm confused about this kind of logic in, warrior stuff, yeah. I'm really get it.
This was exactly what Haranobu wanted, as on their way to battle, the coalition set up camp overnight at Shizawa, allowing for Takeda forces to launch a successful, unexpected night raid over the border, which completely shattered the coalition army. This cleared the path for Haranobu to lay siege to his brother-in-law, Yorishige, and eventually seize his castle of Uehara. Yorishige would be captured and sent back to Kai, where he would later be ordered to commit seppuku. Haranobu would eventually end up taking Suwa Yorishige's daughter, his own niece, as a mistress. Many scoffed at the idea and said that it was a bad omen to do such things. However, Haranobu ignored them all. She would later give birth to the future lord of the Takeda clan, Katsuyori. The Takeda would then end up clashing with Takato Yoritsugu, another lord in the Suwa Valley, who had previously sided with the Takeda against the Suwa clan. Yet Takeda forces led by Itagaki Nobukata and Komai Masatake would crush Yoritsugu and allow for the Takeda clan to establish full control over the Suwa Valley. Yoritsugu would unfortunately escape, although the Takeda clan had now gained a solid foothold in Shinano and a proper staging point for future invasions. 1 year later, in 1543, Oi Sadataka, a Takeda ally in Shinano, would desert Haranobu, giving him a reason to invade the Saku area, where he quickly defeated Sadataka and seized his castle of Nakakubo, which
Does
would
even
allow
need a
further
reason.
expansion northward. Yet, new threats by Yoritsugu in the Ina Valley would put northward expansion on hold. For the next 2 years, Haranobu set about capturing the castles of the Ina Valley, and by 1545, he had secured the majority of the southern portion of Shinano. Another year later, in 1546, he would once again begin working northward, first capturing Uchiyama, then moving on to Shiga, which would prove a much tougher obstacle. Shiga was commanded by Kasahara Kiyoshige, who stubbornly refused to surrender, even after Haranobu had cut off his force's water supply. Kiyoshige remained optimistic that he would eventually receive reinforcements from the Uesugi clan.
I mean, you can't last long without water.
And his hopes were not misplaced, as eventually an Uesugi army around 3,000 strong marched out from Kozuki to aid him against the Takeda. Haranobu responded by sending Itagaki Nobukata at the head of an army to meet the Uesugi forces at the Battle of Odaihara, where the Uesugi army would be completely crushed. Haranobu then had many of the heads taken from the battle mounted atop spears to be displayed outside of Shiga as a sign that no more reinforcements would come to save Kiyoshige. Eventually in 1547, the castle would catch fire, prompting Takeda forces to storm it, leading to the death of Kiyoshige and 200 of his men.
Why does it even take so long to put a castle on fire? Like, if you're sieging a castle that can catch on fire that easily, why aren't they constantly, firing like fire arrows from the outside, trying to put it on fire? It shouldn't be that hard.
After the capture of Shiga, Takeda holdings were now in close proximity to that of the Murakami, under the leadership of Murakami Yoshikiyo, who was considered the strongest daimyo in Shinano. Yoshikiyo, knowing full well that he would be Haranobu's next target, set out to deal with the Takeda. Upon hearing of Yoshikiyo's advance, Haranobu set out to meet him at the Battle of Uedahara. This would end up being the first military disaster for Haranobu. Yoshikiyo had carefully laid out a plan to crush the Takeda, relying heavily on imported Chinese firearms to deal heavy damage to the Takeda charge. These Chinese firearms to deal heavy damage to the...
They're more like a mini cannon, I guess. They're like bamboo gun, right? Yeah. I wonder like how this even works. Do you use this like a shotgun? Like you put a bunch of like small bullets in it or something? Or do you put a big cannonball? Because this looks pretty wide, I mean, like as wide as my fist.
Takeda charge. These Chinese firearms are not seen nearly as effective as the Tanegashima that were now making their way throughout Japan. Yet they still proved valuable when used in mass, then discarded in exchange for a melee charge. As the vanguards met, Itagaki Nobukata would be slain in the fighting as the Murakami absorbed and surrounded the initial Takeda attack. They then moved to strike at the Takeda main body, which caused the death of 2 more top Takeda leaders. Haranobu himself would even be forced to engage in melee combat, taking a spear wound to his left arm. Eventually, the fighting devolved into a stalemate, and Takeda forces would be forced to withdraw. Seeing the Murakami victory at Uedahara prompted the Ogasawara clan, led by Ogasawara Nagatoki, to join the fight to push the Takeda out of Shinano, as the Ogasawara began launching raids against Takeda outposts. Yet the Ogasawara would eventually be halted when Haranobu caught them off guard and dealt them a devastating blow at the Battle of Shiojiritoge. 2 years later, in 1550, Haranobu would continue his advance into Shinano, by first dealing with Ogasawara Nagatoki, whose castles all quickly fell to the Takeda. Nagatoki would then be forced to take
What's that clan doing at the bottom left?
Yoshikiyo.
Just chilling?
Then moved to finally deal with the Murakami. He needed to take Toishi Castle before he could march on the Murakami castle of Katsurao. Haranobu would in time lay siege to Toishi, and what followed was 8 days of intense skirmishes, as Takeda forces continually assaulted the castle. Somehow, the Murakami forces were able to hold out and force Haranobu to abandon the siege. Yet, as Takeda forces began to pull out, the Murakami launched an aggressive counterattack upon the Takeda rear, causing the death of another top Takeda general. Luckily, the Takeda commander Yamamoto Kansuke was able to divert the attack and save the rest of the Takeda army. However, it still remains a fact that the Murakami had now beaten Haranobu twice.
I mean, I didn't realize Takeda did so... I always had the impression of him being more of a, like a typhoon kind of force, but like he won most of his campaign like with just overwhelming force, but no, this was a lot more back and forth. Huh?
Although it would later be revealed that Haranobu had an ace up his sleeve, Sanada Yukitaka, a samurai from Shinano who had previously had his clan crushed by Murakami and Suwa, had now returned to join the Takeda ranks and was quickly being noted as a skillful commander. Having good knowledge of the terrain surrounding Toishi, Yukitaka was able to stage a far more effective siege that would later lead to the castle's fall and the death of roughly 1,000 Murakami soldiers. Later, Yukitaka would be awarded the surrounding land by Haranobu. Haranobu now had the proper staging area he needed to launch his final assault against the Murakami at Katsurao. However, we can also notice that by 1551, Haranobu would take on the teachings of a monk and would formally change to the Buddhist name Shingen. For the next 2 years, Shingen launched attacks on Murakami holdings surrounding Katsurao until finally on May 21st of...
So it's the same thing for both him and Kenshin. Like, they got into religion and that's why they changed their name to Kenshin and Shingen. Interesting. I didn't realize there was the reason for the name change. Okay.
1553, an army under the command of Shingen's son and brother would finally capture Katsurao and force Murakami Yoshikiyo to flee north into Echigo, which, as we remember from episode 12, was now under the rule of Uesugi Kenshin. Murakami Yoshikiyo immediately pleaded with Kenshin for aid, and with Takeda holdings in Shinano now essentially bordering the Uesugi, it was only a matter of time before these two great clans came to blows. Within 12 days of the fall of Katsurao, Kenshin quickly responded by leading an army into Shinano and setting up defensive positions in the north. He had hoped to catch the Takeda army while they were pursuing routing Murakami forces, yet they would ultimately not meet with the Takeda until July 3rd at a place just south of the plain known as Kawanakajima. This initial clash...
So it is not actually an island. I just automatically assume something finishing with Jima is an island, but I guess not here, yeah.
Would be the first battle in an 11-year conflict between two daimyo that would in time become known as feudal Japan's greatest rivals, Takeda Shingen, the Tiger of Kai, and Uesugi Kenshin, the Dragon of Echigo. So, what can we learn?
I guess with Shingen it kind of makes sense since his dad was Tora at the end, which is Tiger, right? I wonder why Kenshin is Dragon. Yeah, cool names though, very cool names. Alright, well, the plot thickens, that's for sure. Yeah, very interesting, like Takeda Shingen's conquest of the smaller clan, right? It really wasn't that simple, despite the fact that he was already so strong, big armies, big amount of territory. The little clan really put up some resistance. I mean, it wasn't smooth sailing. I mean, that took like a couple of years, right? And a lot of loss, to actually get the big win. Quite interesting. And now obviously, yeah, the inevitable. At this point, I guess the Uesugi and Takeda are the biggest clan, yeah. I mean, they've conquered the most territory, they probably have the most troop. Yeah. And then, the Oda on the side, just waiting for now, I guess. Okay, well, great stuff, great stuff. Learning so much, and it's fascinating, that's for sure. Next, I guess we have a two-parter about the battle of... No, okay, it's a three-parter for the battle of Kanawa-Kajima. Interesting. Damn, this is gonna be something. Let's learn about it.
In the last episode, Takeda Shingen, the struggle between Takeda Shingen and Uesugi Kenshin at Kawanakajima is remembered to this day as one of feudal Japan's greatest conflicts. Two rival daimyo, each with respect and admiration for one another, facing off in highly romanticized and gentlemanly fought battles, with the largest and most glamorized clash being the fourth encounter, which occurred in October of 1561. However, what I hope to do is break apart that idea and reveal the true nature of Kawanakajima to be an 11-year-long bloody conflict between two bitter enemies that would eventually, by the end, blossom into respected foes. Unfortunately, due to the sheer amount of information I am trying to pack into this video, I have decided to split the battles of Kawanakajima into two separate episodes, with this episode just covering
Sounds fortunate to me, I mean, the more detailed the better.
The first three engagements. This will turn out better for working chronologically, as it will allow me to cover the very important Battle of Okehazama in the next episode, before returning to the second half of the Kawanakajima conflict, including the massive fourth battle. So, with that said, let's dive back in. In the previous episode, The Road to Kawanakajima, we left off in 1553, as the Takeda clan captured
Tangent a little bit, but I keep talking about that mod, so cool. And in the only campaign that I've done so far, again, I ended up working for the Uesugi. And yeah, in the end, even though the game, is like, it's a sandbox and everything is simulated and not every two game plays the same, it did end up that, because obviously we're kind of bordering each other, most of the biggest fighting was between us, the Uesugi versus the Takeda, and multiple times I fought different Takeda commanders in the field, and I even, captured Shingen a few times, but in the game you could execute him, but you don't really, you try to avoid execution, because with the game system it's kind of like, not the best thing to do for your reputation, because even your allies don't really lie when you execute other lord. So, I captured him once or twice and let him go. I even captured some of his castles. Yeah. I really can't wait to play that mod again. I mean, I'm still waiting for the next major update of it. But it was great. I really recommend it. Mountain Blade Bannerlord, so cool.
The Murakami power base of Katsurao, shattering the Murakami clan, and forcing Uesugi Kenshin to quickly respond by leading an army south to set up defensive positions against the Takeda advance, just below the plain of Kawanakajima. We now return to the fray, as Kenshin's forward position did not meet the Takeda army like he had hoped to do. This caused Kenshin's army of 5,000, along with remaining Murakami forces under the command of Murakami Yoshikiyo, to instead move down the Chikumagawa to establish themselves at a place known as Hachiman, a location known by the famous shrine to the god of war which stands there.
I was gonna say, yeah. My first thought was Hachiman from Oregairu, but then I remembered what the name is from. The god of war.
As it just so happened, Hachiman was also the furthest position north that the Takeda had extended to after the fall of Katsurao. Essentially, Takeda forces on the eastern bank of the Chikumagawa could visibly see the massive Uesugi army forming on the western shore. Shingen was immediately informed of this, yet it is not known whether he gave the order to engage or not.
I'm still confused because 5,000 seems like insanely slow, right? Insanely low in numbers. Didn't we have an 80,000 army earlier? Yeah.
What is known is that the Takeda vanguard engaged with the Uesugi army near the shrine. Ultimately, the Takeda were forced to fall back. Yet now, Shingen was aware of the Uesugi threat. After the Uesugi victory at Hachiman, Kenshin pressed his advantage south, eventually crossing the river and laying siege to Katsurao in attempts to retake it for his Murakami allies. Kenshin's siege was ultimately a failure. Thus, Katsurao remained in Takeda hands. Yet the Murakami, led by Yoshikiyo, pressed on, succeeding in retaking Shiora Castle, which had previously fallen to the Takeda. Yoshikiyo then went about re-establishing himself in the surrounding area. This stunning turn of events caught Shingen off guard, although he was not yet willing to engage Kenshin in the open. Instead, he withdrew to Fukashi, modern-day Matsumoto, which was under the control of Shingen's retainer, Baba Nobuharu. It would be 3 months before battle resumed, yet when the time did come, Shingen put his focus on retaking Shiyoda, recapturing all the surrounding strongholds and slaughtering the entire garrison at each, as a warning to the other Murakami loyalists. With Shiyoda now isolated, Yoshikiyo was forced to flee once again, as Shingen re-entered the castle. Shingen, after his victory against the Murakami, continued his push north once again. However, this time, he was wary of Kenshin. His caution was rightly placed, as the Uesugi army would reappear and face him at a location known as Fusei. Fusei, which is located in the southwestern portion of the Kawanakajima Plain, is considered to be the first battle of Kawanakajima. The fighting at Fusei, however, is not remembered for being a major engagement, as it is likely only the vanguards met with one another. Yet Shingen showed he was not willing to commit his main body to create a massive struggle, and instead, with his forward troops unable to break through the Uesugi lines, he ordered another withdrawal. Yet only a few days later, as Shingen moved back past Hachiman, Kenshin pursued him, and the two armies would briefly clash again. With momentum on the Uesugi side, Shingen ordered a frantic retreat. This marked Kenshin's third victory against the Takeda in 1553. The remainder of the year consisted of...
But I'd be kind of scared though, like I'm winning, but this Takeda Shingen guy was known to, so far, has been extremely aggressive and strong and conquering. He hasn't really given me like a full-on battle yet. I'd be kind of afraid that something is being schemed.
Some scrambled fighting between the two clans as they continuously raided each other's positions, yet no more major action was to be seen. As winter moved in and both armies returned home, Kenshin ordered the construction of 2 new castles on the hills of Katsurayama and Motodoriyama, which overlooked the Kawanakajima plain to the north. Kenshin figured that these new defensive positions, coupled with the other forts he controlled in northern Shinano and the rivers that marked the plain, would prove to be a nearly impassable obstacle for the Takeda, should they
just go left into Echu, I guess?
Try to march north again. Essentially, Kenshin had created defense in depth. 1554 saw no battle between the Takeda and Uesugi, yet Shingen, eager to rid Shinano of all opposition, would march on the Kiso clan and
I was wondering, like, what is that clan and are they gonna do anything? Okay. They did absolutely nothing. They were just waiting for their turn.
Subjugate them to his cause. Another major event that occurred in 1554 was the formation of a grand alliance between the Hojo, Takeda, and Imagawa. Moderated by the militant Imagawa monk, Taigin Seisai, the 3 clans agreed to an alliance bound by marriages to one another's families.
Oh, this is kind of scary.
This would allow each of them to expand their holdings in different directions. The Hojo could focus on their remaining conquest of the Kanto region. The Takeda could focus on their advance north against the Uesugi, and the Imagawa could
Wouldn't it be smarter for the Hojo to assist the fight against the Uesugi?
move west, as we will come to see in the next episode. Imagawa Yoshimoto had his eyes on taking the capital. Yet, returning to the conflict between Shingen and Kenshin, hostilities would finally resume in 1555. It started when Shingen ordered his local supporters in the north to begin attacking Uesugi possessions near the valley of the Itoigawa, which lay to the west of Kenshin's main castle of Kasugayama. This caused Kenshin much concern, as he now realized Shingen could potentially bypass the defensive network he had previously established over Kawanakajima by moving through the mountains to the west. Kenshin responded by establishing his army near Zenkoji Temple, which lay just north of the plain, and would allow him to position himself accordingly depending on whichever way Shingen decided to strike. Yet, to the misfortune of Kenshin, the head priest at Zenkoji had Takeda's sympathies, and thus slipped away to reveal the Uesugi positions to the Takeda commander at Asahiyama Castle, which
I mean, I'm surprised that doesn't happen more often, even if it's not a priest. with the amount of people involved, in the country itself, it wouldn't be crazy for some peasants to see the army assembling there and just go tell the Takeda for some coins, right? So I assume it's, pretty hard to move your army without the other side knowing.
Lay just to the west. Upon hearing this, Shingen moved reinforcements into Asahiyama, which included 300 men armed with arquebus guns. He then moved his main body into position just south of Zenkoji and across the Saigawa. Kenshin immediately moved to strike at the Takeda, resulting in both forces meeting at the ford in the river. Once again, the vanguards met, yet the main bodies of both armies were held back in anticipation. This would be considered the second battle of Kawanakajima.
I imagine you're the main army just, on the other bank, just looking at the guys just killing each other in the river, and, you're just told to wait and look. That's kind of annoying.
What followed the battle in the ford would be several months of an intricate game of chess between both commanders as they cautiously maneuvered and repositioned opposite one another. It is this portion of the conflict that is often regarded to as a mock battle, as neither side was willing to fully engage, rather establish themselves and launch a raid, or fend off a raid, then reposition in response to each other's actions, and do it all over again. One break in the monotony came when Kenshin launched an assault on the Takeda-controlled Asahiyama castle. Yet the arquebus guns Shingen had moved into the fortification proved to be a deadly addition and caused the Uesugi attack to completely shatter. After 4 months, supply...
Wow, that's so good though, because the guns at this time still take a while to reload, right? Like, shoot, and then with all the little stuff you have to do, I don't even know if you can get 2 shots per minute, but if you have a bow, it's like, shoo. Like, even if you're not that fast, you can probably do like 1 arrow every 10 seconds, and sure, it probably does less damage and maybe less chance to penetrate armor, but, it sounds a lot better, I guess. So why was the gun so devastating? I don't know.
Supplies began to dwindle for both armies, and many of the Ashigaru were needed back home to tend to the fields. Thus, both sides agreed to peace. However, in result, the two agreed that Shingen's castle of Asahiyama would be demolished. 2 years later, in 1557, with the knowledge of how Kenshin had reacted in the previous encounter, Shingen devised a new plan of attack. This new campaign would use the early spring.
What was that?
Devised a new plan of attack. This new
that was too fast.
Previous encounter.
One more time.
Shingen devised a new plan of attack. This new
I can't do it. That's annoying. I'm just gonna put slow down. Here we go.
Encounter. Shingen devised a new plan of attack. This new...
Pinkerton is the best Weezer album, okay. Well, I don't know if this was worth it. I don't even know what this is. I don't know Pinkerton. I don't know what Weezer is, a band, but okay. That wasn't worth it. I have no context, and now it's bugged and I can't put it back to normal. Fucking great. Okay, let me just refresh. 10:15.
57. With the knowledge of how Kenshin had reacted in the previous encounter, Shingen devised a new plan of attack. This new campaign would use the early spring snow as an advantage to keep Kenshin bottled up, while the Takeda would advance to secure Katsurayama Castle. The seizure of Katsurayama would allow Shingen access to the mountain passage that lay beyond, simply allowing his forces to bypass the Uesugi defensive network and move in deep towards the Echigo border. The assault on Katsurayama, led by Baba Nobuharu, was a hard-fought and brutal struggle. Yet in the end, with Kenshin powerless to aid the defenders, the castle fell, allowing the Takeda advance to continue through the mountains,
Where is he powerless? Couldn't he come eventually?
where they also seized Nagahama.
Damn.
Shingen's army had completely outflanked the Uesugi defensive line and were now laying siege to the final castle on the border of Echigo, Iyama. However, the castle's hardened defenders and the thaw of spring allowed Kenshin to send an army under the command of his brother-in-law, Nagao Masakage, to break the siege. With the odds now against him, Shingen withdrew. Kenshin's main body then moved to retake their old position at Zenkoji, where they had last laid in wait for the Takeda. He set about raiding the recently captured Takeda holdings and ordered the reconstruction and fortification of Asahiyama, which had been destroyed after the Second Battle of Kawanakajima in 1555.
How fast do you even build a castle like this? I know they're not like... It's not like a western castle, right? They're pretty small in comparison, but even then, how long does it take to build a castle?
Kenshin wished for now was a decisive battle against the Takeda, and Kenshin now possessed the ability to decide where to engage Shingen. Yet with the Kawanakajima plain appearing far more vulnerable after the fall of Katsurayama, Kenshin decided on a location just north of Kawanakajima, known as Uenohara, which was in close proximity to Kenshin's other stronghold of Motodoriyama. Shingen cautiously moved back into Shinano and established himself at Odaihara. Yet he was not foolish enough to take Kenshin's bait and march towards Uenohara. This prompted Kenshin to take far more drastic measures.
This really is definitely changing my perception of Takeda Shingen. In my mind, he was, one of those warrior that's, very straightforward. He just wins a lot with strength, numbers, and front row attack. But he's definitely much more of a strategist than I ever realized.
Releasing mounted raiding parties to deal devastating blows against Takeda positions. Still, Shingen refused to move. Instead, he ordered his general Yamagata Masakage to raid Uesugi positions in retaliation. Yet, Masakage continued on his warpath and eventually ended up capturing Otari Castle to the far north. This alarmed Kenshin that Shingen's forces may be trying to circle around and strike into Echigo. Thus, Kenshin ordered a full retreat home. With his back finally turned, Shingen struck and advanced on the Uesugi rear. Once again, however, the main bodies of both armies remained out of the fighting. Yet the Takeda vanguard engaged with the Uesugi rearguard at Uenohara, resulting in the third battle of Kawanakajima. Yet the Uesugi line would once again hold and allow for Kenshin to return to Kasugayama and force Shingen to once again pull out. After the end of the third engagement, a lasting calm would finally settle over the Kawanakajima plain, as both Shingen and Kenshin would be forced to address other matters. Specifically, renewed hostilities between the Hojo and the Uesugi. However, that is a story for another time.
But then isn't that good for the Takeda? If the Uesugi are so busy fighting the Hojo, Takeda will have even less struggle to take over Uesugi territory.
The last 5 years had been hard and bloody, as Shingen and Kenshin continually tried to outplay one another. Yet, if any true victor can be seen thus far, it is Uesugi Kenshin, whose goal to halt the Takeda advance north had so far proven successful. Shingen no doubt must have grown truly frustrated, as his strong invasion of Shinano, which had all but been a total success, now had come to a complete and abrupt stop. Perhaps he had never...
I mean, he shouldn't be surprised though. He fought a bunch of small clans, and now he's finally run into a clan that controls almost as much territory as him,
Anticipated how skilled Kenshin would be in warfare. Yet, by 1557, he had surely now taken in the fact that he was facing off against someone truly his match. On the other side, Kenshin too must have a growing respect for his enemy, as these intense struggles showcased the very peak of strategic thought. However, did either of these two realize what was to come? Did these growing rivals ever expect the massive battle that would finally erupt just 4 years away? Perhaps.
Probably.
So,
I'm sure they both knew that this isn't done, so yeah, obviously they're gonna keep fighting until one wins, so of course massive battles coming, yeah. Makes sense. Okay, great episode, great episode. Really interesting, this whole back and forth, the little skirmish. I mean, again, it's almost like the opposite of what you think of, like, samurai lord at the time, or at least my stereotype in my head, where, a lot of them are more about honor, so, they just do a stupid frontal assault and that's about it. And we've seen some do that, but clearly Kenshin and Takeda are like, I guess they're both, they both came up with like the meritocracy, right? They're maybe less about just simple honor and like straightforward stuff. And so yeah, they're both using a lot more strategy, conniving, and it's pretty interesting, like the fact that they're both willing to just not do full engagement and retreat, advance, retreat, it's very, very interesting. Next episode, the Battle of Oke Azama.
In the last
Mighty interesting.
Plans to
Oke Azama.
By 1554, it has been 87 years since the official end of the Onin War in 1467. Essentially, 87 years since the Sengoku Jidai began.
That's crazy.
Plunging Japan into endless war between the many clans who rule the land. As we've already seen, the Ashikaga shogunate, masters of the samurai class,
We're like only halfway through, I guess.
and powerless to stop the fighting. And instead, over the years, the shoguns diverted their attention inward to the arts and culture which were rich in the capital. Had the Ashikaga shogunate been strong, their might would equal authority, and with that authority, they could have potentially brought an end to the wars which plagued the country. Although the current shogun, Ashikaga Yoshiteru, had no reason to feel weak, as he was supported by powerful allies, namely the Miyoshi clan, who, if you remember in years past, broke away from their Hosokawa overlords and had since then seeped their influence deep into shogunal politics, just as their predecessors had done. Of course, the Miyoshi had used their control to maintain their position of superiority over Kyoto and central Honshu. In fact, the Miyoshi are a prime example of the problems facing Japan by the mid-1500s, as each clan was essentially out solely for their own gain. What I mean by this is the main driving force behind the majority of each clan's territorial expansion was regional dominance, which is one of the things...
Yeah, I guess, like, no one at this point is thinking, reunite the country or something, I guess, And it makes sense because it probably doesn't seem realistic, right? It's been 80 years since all this started. It just doesn't seem, like, even fighting the neighboring clan next to you is, an insanely complicated enterprise. So I guess no one is thinking, I'm gonna conquer all the clans and reunite Japan under, like, one ruler or something. We know Oden would, I guess, thinks that eventually, but it's not surprising that no one is really thinking that yet. It seems kind of impossible. I mean, most of the rulers right now, they were born in this time of war, that's all they know. They don't remember the time of, like, everybody under one rule, be it the shogunate or the emperors before that. That's kind of crazy, yeah.
I really hope you take away from these videos, because there is a very popular myth that you see quite a lot, that each daimyo was allowed to become the next shogun, which is completely false. In fact, to even be qualified to become shogun, a daimyo must be able to trace his lineage back to the Minamoto clan, the rulers of the first shogunate. Thus, each daimyo, for the most part, was only out to increase their power and sphere of influence. So the wars continued, creating high amounts of lawlessness and an endless quantity of hardships for the lower classes of society. Fortunately, provinces under the rule of stronger daimyo were less prone to the suffering that was felt within war-torn regions. And by 1554, one of the mightiest and most stable clans in the entire country were the Imagawa, led by Imagawa Yoshimoto, who ruled over Suruga, Totomi, and asserted strong influence and control over the Matsudaira clan of Mikawa. Though in previous years, the Imagawa had clashed with many of their neighbors, most notably the Hojo and Oda, Yoshimoto's poor capabilities as a military leader saw to the failure of each of his campaigns. Thus, in time, he would instead entrust leadership of his armies to his uncle, the militant monk Taigen Seisai. Yoshimoto's true strength actually laid in the realm of politics and diplomacy. In fact, one can see Yoshimoto had an infatuation with court politics, as he even modeled his capital of Sanpu to look and function like the imperial court in Kyoto.
Okay.
And with this love of politics, an idea popped into his head. The Imagawa were strong, and their position was an ideal one, with their provinces sitting upon the Tokaido Road. This caused Yoshimoto to begin speculating. What if I was to march on the capital? What if the Imagawa were to seize Kyoto? Now, I have read different sources that say different things. Some say Yoshimoto wished to become shogun himself, deposing the Ashikaga, while other sources I've read merely claim he wished to bend the Ashikaga to his will, as other clans had previously accomplished. If he truly desired to become the next shogun, it was wholly in his power, as the Imagawa could in fact trace their family back to the Minamoto clan. Yet, I do not believe Yoshimoto wished to become the new shogun, and this is for two reasons. The first being that to oppose the Ashikaga shogunate would create a larger struggle than ever desired, as many clans would no doubt rise up to support the Ashikaga and the status quo. The second reason...
Would they? I mean, I had the impression that at this point no one really cared about the shogunate anymore. Like for the last 80 years, it seems like the shogunate are just on their side of the country, and you know they're basically the same as just individual clan. They don't really have powers. At least that was my impression. I thought everybody stopped caring about the shogunate since the individual fighting started.
Was that being shogun was to be military leader of all Japan, and as I've already mentioned, by now Yoshimoto completely understood that he was not a strong military commander. Thus, he most likely sought to control the Ashikaga, dominating them for his own aims. However, it is not known whether he wished to do this out of a lust to strengthen his own position, or rather, if he actually felt a benevolent desire to bring an end to the chaotic age of warring states. With his heart now set on claiming the capital, he began laying down the foundations for his great march. As I mentioned in the previous episode, beginning in 1554, Yoshimoto used his political savvy to form a grand alliance. He called together the leaders of the Takeda and Hojo. Although Yoshimoto and Shingen were already strong allies, as Yoshimoto was married to Shingen's sister, the plan was for even more marriages to occur, binding the three clans together with family ties. With a secure alliance, they could each put full focus and effort behind accomplishing their own goals. Hojo Ujeyasu could continue swallowing the Kanto region. Takeda Shingen could place total attention on his war against Uesugi Kenshin, and Imagawa Yoshimoto could embark on his campaign to claim Kyoto. Unfortunately,
I know he gets tough on his way because of the Oda being in the way.
Before he could even begin his march, his great strategist Taigen Seisai died in 1557. Although all hope was not lost, as a new rising star could be seen, Matsudaira Motoyasu, the man who would in time become one of Japan's greatest leaders and the third of the country's great unifiers, Tokugawa Ieyasu. Motoyasu's childhood had been a chaotic one, and is suited for its own video in time. However, what is important to know now was that he was raised as a hostage of the Imagawa clan. Yet now that he had come of age and had taken leadership of the Matsudaira clan of Mikawa under the vassalage of the Imagawa, he was quick to prove himself as a competent military leader, scoring decisive victories against the Oda of Owari province, now ruled by Oda Nobunaga.
Oh, okay.
A man considered by most to be a fool. With strong figures like Motoyasu leading the Imagawa march on the capital, Yoshimoto felt confident his plan could work. In fact, it was a completely feasible and level-headed plan at that.
It really is this thing of like, you know, the art of war, like, it's better when your enemies underestimate you, right? So I guess it's great if they think you're a fool.
As the clans that stood between Yoshimoto and Kyoto were seen as nowhere near as strong as the Imagawa, all he needed to do was push aside any opposition along the way, and his victory could be achieved. Thus, finally, in June of 1560, his march began, with the first leg of his journey to be crushing the Oda clan of Owari. With his rear secure, he brought with him a massive combined Imagawa Matsudaira army, numbering around 25,000 strong. The initial stages of the invasion of Owari went as best as could be desired for Yoshimoto, easily seizing and burning the castles along the Oda frontier, with Motoyasu personally capturing Marune Castle before being ordered to move up and take position at Odaka. With the Oda on the verge of collapse and victory in his sight,
Is this actually, like, going great, or is this part of the plan of Oda Nobunaga?
Yoshimoto brought his main body up to a forested location known as Okehazama, where he wished to briefly pause for a head viewing ceremony before moving on to take the Oda power base of
Head
Kyoto.
viewing ceremony.
Meanwhile, chaos was ensuing for the Oda, being completely unable to halt the Imagawa advance, and near capitulation, many Oda retainers proposed plans to hold up in the castle for a last-ditch defense, while others pleaded with Nobunaga to
So it is, they're actually losing, okay, it's not a plan. Or is it? I'm waiting for an anime moment.
flee and allow Owari to fall. Nobunaga would have none of it. Acting as the wild card he always was, he opted for a different plan.
Oh,
Wishing to meet his enemy in the field, Nobunaga quickly mustered what men he could, forming an army around 2,000, and sallied forth
That's it.
towards the war front. Arriving at the Imagawa-controlled Narumi Castle, local scouts informed Nobunaga of Yoshimoto's location at Okehazama. Thus, he quickly devised a plan of attack. He ordered his soldiers to erect hundreds of banners opposite of Narumi, in aims to trick the Imagawa into thinking that was where the Oda main body lie. With the Imagawa garrison at Narumi falling for the ruse, Nobunaga led his forces towards Okehazama under the cover of night. It was then that Nobunaga was blessed with the best of all possible luck. A tremendous thunderstorm erupted overhead. The
damn.
ensuing downpour and the black of night covering their advance, the Imagawa scouts never had a chance to spot the Oda army coming, as Nobunaga led his army around to the north.
Let's go.
Early, near the dawn, as the rain began to cease, Nobunaga led his small force on a valiant charge against the Imagawa encampment at Okehazama. The Oda were outnumbered 12 to 1, yet with their attack being completely unsuspected, and many of the Imagawa troops being unarmed, asleep, or still drunk after a long night of celebrating their victories, the Oda swept through Okehazama, butchering the Imagawa army.
1 to 12 odds. That is cooked. I mean, that's crazy. I understand that it's more likely to happen when you catch your enemy by surprise in their camp, but man, it's still insane to me.
Some Imagawa samurai did manage to form up in aims to fend off the Oda attackers, yet they were too late to form any real defense. Yoshimoto, upon hearing the commotion, charged out of his tent to see what was going on. However, before he could even take it all in, he was cut down and decapitated.
Oh,
The Oda had won the brief yet legendary battle at Okehazama, though I have a hard time calling it a battle, even if it technically was one. Rather, I prefer to refer to it as a massacre, as so many of the Imagawa soldiers were slaughtered.
the... I mean, okay. You know what I mean? Just, yeah. How does this even happen? Like 2,000 versus 20,000, and it goes this well. Crazy.
Before they could even put up any resistance. What was left of the once grand army of the Imagawa fled home, including Motoyasu, who returned to Mikawa in aims to finally break free from the grips of his now weakened overlords. Nobunaga was now viewed as a first-rate daimyo and a fool
Demon Lord.
for crushing a
Sorry,
clan
that's a
as
different game.
mighty as the Imagawa. However, Yoshimoto's planned march on the capital would have a profound effect on Nobunaga, as in time, he would take the idea for himself.
I mean, if I win a battle like this with this kind of numbers, I would think, yeah, I'm the chosen one. And if someone can, beat everybody else and conquer the country, that's me. Yeah. You'd think you're chosen by the heaven. I mean, 1 to 12 odds. Mamma mia.
One final interesting piece of information is the presence of a figure known as Tokichiro at Okehazama. Tokichiro was an Ashigaru foot soldier who was made Oda Nobunaga's sandal bearer. In time, Nobunaga would realize that Tokichiro was smart and cunning, and eventually he would be given leadership positions, soon enough becoming the famous Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the second of Japan's three great unifiers.
Ah, that's him. Isn't there a story about like some guy warming a sandal for his master? Anyway, this is the guy that betrayed Nobunaga, right? And then gets betrayed by the next guy. Yeah, I think so.
Thus, oddly enough, all three of Japan's would-be unifiers were all present in Owari.
Oh, Matsudaira Motoyasu becomes Hideyoshi. I'm so mad. I seriously get so annoyed with all the names. Like, why does everybody has 10,000 names? Seriously, like, stop it. Just stop it. Okay, so Matsudaira is later Ieyasu. So, yeah, okay. Hideyoshi didn't betray Nobunaga. Okay. Someone betrayed him, right? Nobunaga dies in the palace burning or something, I think.
Province during Yoshimoto's march towards the capital, which is extremely fascinating in retrospect. So,
Oh, Akichi Mitsuhide. Okay. Interesting. Okay, well then. Mr. Nobunaga was kind of crazy this episode. Yeah. It's kind of crazy that, like, at first he does so bad as most of the country gets taken over, and he doesn't seem to be able to deal with it. But then it's like back against the wall, suddenly he's a genius, It's, some people are like that, I guess. They really need to be the underdog to win. Hideyoshi killed Mitsuhide to avenge Nobunaga. Okay. Well, I guess we'll learn all that. I'm confused, so we'll have to learn all that. Next, the second part of the Kawanakajima battle.
before we begin, I just want to say, if you have not watched episode 16 yet, I highly recommend you do so first, before watching this episode, as it details the first half of the Kawanakajima conflict, which includes the first 3 battles. So then, picking up where we left off, 1557 saw a temporary end to the war between Takeda Shingen and Uesugi Kenshin. After their clash at Uenohara, Shingen and Kenshin both withdrew. Once again, their main bodies had not engaged, and only the Takeda vanguard had met with the Uesugi rearguard. Thus, the third battle had ended just as the first 2 had, appearing to be nothing more than a mere skirmish. Shingen's third attempt to defeat Kenshin and press north was once again foiled. However, he was now under the realization that bypassing the Uesugi defensive network at Kawanakajima was not a viable option.
Okay.
His next bet would be on dominating the plain, using the castles he already owned along with new additions to increase his control over the area, and use this superiority to bring Kenshin to his demise. Yet it would be some time before this new plan of his would come to fruition. In the meantime, Kenshin had gone to war against the Hojo in what would be the largest struggle between the Uesugi and the Hojo since the siege of Kawagoe Castle in...
Man, I feel kind of bad for the Uesugi, like, they don't have time to chill. I mean, fight the Takeda for multiple years, then finally a break and now the Hojo are attacking you. And you know that the Takeda might join back at any moment. Yeah, that is not the best situation.
1546. If we remember back to episode 12, Kenshin, who was at that point still known as Nagao Kagetora, used political savvy to become one with the Uesugi clan and be named Kanrei of Kanto. Kanrei, which can be translated to shogunal deputy, put Kenshin as the true overlord of the Kanto region, although by this time the Hojo clan had taken most of Kanto into their grip. Wishing to display his dominance, in the spring of 1561, Kenshin led an army against the Hojo, seizing Matsuyama Castle in Musashi, along with Kamakura, before marching on Odawara Castle, the power base of the Hojo clan. Hojo Ujiyasu would quickly set out to meet Kenshin and break the siege of Odawara, and on top of this, Takeda Shingen, showing support for his Hojo allies, marched his own army into Kozuke, threatening...
Kenshin needs his own alliance. I mean, there's a Go province, you know, they don't seem involved in any of the conflict. Maybe he should make some alliance.
Uesugi holdings to the north. Left with no other option, Kenshin was forced to withdraw. Yet it was then that Shingen turned his attention back to the Kawanakajima plain for the first time in 4 years. But now, he was returning to a vastly different Kawanakajima than their last encounter. In 1556, Sanada Yukitaka had secured Amakazari Castle for the Takeda clan. And of course, 1 year later, Baba Nobuharu had seized Katsurayama in the prelude to the third battle of Kawanakajima. Since then, Takeda forces had captured Takanashi Castle, and under Shingen's orders had constructed a new castle called Kaizu on the plains. What was once a solid Uesugi defensive network was now a hotly contested border between the two clans. In June of 1561, Shingen launched an attack on Warigadake Castle near the Echigo border, capturing it and causing Kenshin concern. Anticipating another invasion by the Takeda, Kenshin mustered an army of 18,000 and marched towards Kawanakajima, leaving a token force behind to guard the western...
now that he's fighting Shingen again, it's not gonna be the Hojo attacking on the other side again.
Echigo border, in case Shingen tried to completely outflank the Uesugi and attack through Eichu. Kenshin took his usual position at Zenkuji, yet, understanding how different the plain had become, opted for a new strategy. Leaving 5,000 men behind at Zenkuji to act as a rearguard, Kenshin led the rest of his forces across the rivers and up to a hill known as Saijo-san, which overlooked the newly constructed Kaizu Castle. Kosaka Masanobu, the commander of Kaizu Castle, learned of the Uesugi movements and immediately sent word to Shingen, who was currently home in Kai province. Through a coordinated system of signal fires, Shingen was informed of the Uesugi march in just a matter of hours.
That's cool.
Shingen quickly set out at...
I always think of the Lord of the Rings with the signal fire system. I wonder how many countries did that. I guess with Japan it works because it's big but not that big, so signal fire system works, yeah.
At the head of 16,000 men and made haste towards Kawanakajima, keeping the Chikumagawa between him and Kenshin. He would eventually set up his position across the rivers from the Uesugi army and Kaizu Castle, a location which also worked to block Kenshin off from his route home. It is here that Shingen amassed his forces, swelling his army to 20,000 strong. The two armies then sat for several days of no movement.
But actually I would say that Kenshin has the advantage, because he still has the 5,000 on the other side, so he might be able to sandwich the Takeda army.
Until finally, Shingen did something. He set out from his encampment and headed right into Kaizu Castle, all with no response from Kenshin. Once inside Kaizu, Shingen consulted with his generals on how to lure Kenshin off of the hill. One of Shingen's top generals, Yamamoto Kansuke, would offer up a master plan, which is often referred to as Operation Woodpecker. Just as a woodpecker strikes the bark of a tree to lure out insects to eat, the Takeda army at night, under the cover of darkness, would split in two, with Shingen leading 8,000 men to the center of the Kawanakajima plain, while Kosaka Masanobu would lead another 12,000 around to the south of Saijo-san.
So they also want to surround them. They both have the same idea, it seems.
Where he would then assault the Uesugi army and drive them down the hill into the waiting jaws of Shingen's forces. Shingen agreed to the plan. Thus, late on the night of October 17th, the Takeda forces began to move. Shingen's portion of the army most notably included Takeda family members, such as his brothers and son, while the force led by Masanobu to assault Saijo-san included figures such as Baba Nobuharu and Sanada Yukitaka. Things began perfectly as Shingen silently moved across.
I mean, it only works if they actually manage to push them off the hill. And the numbers are actually kind of close, so...
Across the rivers, and in total darkness, established a formation upon the plain. Meanwhile, Masanobu's forces quietly crept up the side of Saijo-san. However, as dawn began to break, and the Takeda forces reached the top of the hill, they found...
Did they move? Is Kenshin also doing a Uno-reverse? Oh no.
Found it to be completely deserted, for Kenshin had moved his army long before Masanobu's troops had even begun their climb. Instead, Kenshin had maneuvered his forces down the hill earlier in the night, and as Shingen set up his position upon the center of the plain.
Wait, so now he's heavily outnumbered in the plain. Then the maneuvering and outmaneuvering between these two.
Kenshin launched a surprise attack, ordering a full charge, smashing into Shingen's left flank, which was under the command of his brother, Takeda Nobushige. It appears that Kenshin was simply going to reposition himself back at Zenkoji, yet when he discovered the Takeda army forming up on the center of the plain, his plans changed to that of attack.
So it was just luck, he didn't actually realize their plan, he just got lucky with his own movement. Smart.
Kenshin's vanguard, led by Kakizaki Kagei, were quick to cut their way through Nobushige's unit, eventually killing him. Kagei's force then fell back as fresh Uesugi samurai poured in to maintain the pressure. While this was going on, another Uesugi unit smashed into the Takeda right flank, and once again, as soldiers began to tire, Kenshin would rotate them out with fresh troops. This tactic of rotating reinforcements allowed the Uesugi army to break through the Takeda front lines. For the first time in all of their encounters, the main bodies of Shingen and Kenshin met, and as more soldiers flew into the battle, the bodies began to pile up as the Takeda forces fought desperately against the unrelenting push of the Uesugi. Although the previous 3 battles of Kawanakajima had been minor engagements, it was apparent that this clash would be a meat grinder. At the center, Shingen tried desperately to hold his army together, remarkably keeping communication between himself and his commanders open. Yet, being heavily outnumbered, the Takeda were quickly being destroyed.
The only chance is the other force trying to join. Yeah, I don't know how far they are.
Eventually, Uesugi samurai broke through towards Shingen's headquarters, and with Kenshin leading the charge, one of the most epic moments in the entire Sengoku Jidai occurred. Kenshin rode his horse directly towards Shingen's position and began attacking Shingen himself.
Whoa.
This was the first time the two had ever met face to face. Shingen, unable to draw his sword fast enough, instead used his war fan to parry Kenshin.
It's a war fan, that's what it is. This is way too shonen anime. Like, who wrote this? Woody wrote this. Someone was trying to get into Shonen Jump.
Kenshin's blade. Kenshin repeatedly tried to land an attack on Shingen, yet Shingen was able to hold him off until finally his bodyguards rushed to his aid and caused Kenshin to spur his horse out of the action. With things rapidly falling apart for the Takeda, Yamamoto Kansuke took the blame upon himself for the failure of his woodpecker plan. Thus, he grabbed his spear and rushed into the thick of the fighting, where he would be severely wounded, after which he would drag himself away from the combat and commit seppuku. Yet as defeat seemed almost certain for the Takeda, Masanobu's woodpecker force charged down from sight.
As always, what can I say except like such a waste? I mean, you know, like sure the plan didn't work out, but it's not because it was stupid. I don't know. It's such a waste of a talent, I would say, that he just kills himself after this, rather than fight another day and try to fix the situation.
Joseon to launch a counterattack against the Uesugi. Kenshin had expected this and thus left a unit of 1,000 men to defend against Masanobu. Yet it wouldn't be enough to stop him from pushing past to aid Shingen's force as it fell apart. Now being vastly outnumbered himself by the addition of fresh Takeda troops.
What about the other 5,000 from Kenshin that he left behind?
Kenshin ordered a full retreat. Thus, the fourth battle of Kawanakajima came to an end. And surprisingly, the Takeda can be observed as the true victors.
I was gonna say, like, yeah. I mean, they both lost a lot, but it's not a clear victory.
Driving the Uesugi from the field. However, Kenshin would still hold an upper hand overall, as massive casualties would prove too much for Shingen to overcome and continue northward. In fact, the fourth battle of Kawanakajima would go down as one of the bloodiest battles of the period, with it being estimated that Kenshin lost around 70% of his army, while Shingen lost around 60%, along with several of his generals. The two would not meet again until 3 years later, in 1564, although by then, the Takeda grip over the Kawanakajima plain was firmly secure. Thus, the disadvantaged Kenshin refused to engage, and instead, both armies merely sat across from one another.
Again.
Until finally, Kenshin gave the order to withdraw. The two great rivals would never clash with each other ever again. It appears they had come to an understanding. Shingen was an unstoppable force, yet Kenshin was an immovable object. And so the two knew their place, after what would be remembered as the 5 battles of Kawanakajima.
I wonder, though, I feel like, looking at everything, I think the Takeda might have won eventually if they kept trying. I mean, they just had the slight advantage every time.
In the end, Kenshin held the line against the Takeda. Thus, Shingen would never be able to launch a successful invasion into Echigo. Although it was not a total defeat for the Takeda, as by the conclusion of their conflict,
they secured the territory.
The Kawanakajima plain was now under Shingen's control, causing Shinano to essentially fall totally to the Takeda clan.
Alright.
What can we learn?
Damn, why am I sad that it's like the final battle between them? People died, I shouldn't be sad, right? But I'm really like looking at this like it's a shonen manga or something. It's like, damn, they'll never get their final battle to really decide who can win. But maybe it's more beautiful that, they both realize that the other is too good, so better not fight again. There's too much to lose, might as well just keep what we got or something. Alright, great stuff. Very shonen anime, this whole part. Seriously. Okay, next I have not an actual episode, but something called War in Japan. Is this just a recap? Oh yeah, it's literally saying that it's a recap. Huh? It also says that this is the end of the first phase. So actually, maybe I might stop here for today, since it's the end of the phase. Huh? And then we go back next time with the reclamation of Mikawa. You know what? Let's do that. I think that was a pretty epic way to end for today. Okay, well, the stuff with Shingen and Kenshin was pretty sick. I mean, again, like the constant maneuvering, repositioning, back and forth, way more interesting than them just throwing themselves in like straightforward battle every time. That was great. I definitely understand both quite a bit more than before, where I mostly just knew their name, I guess. Very, very interesting part of the Sengoku Jidai. I'd say the most interesting so far. Like, by far, the conflict between the two, the most interesting so far, yeah. I think there's still probably going to be even better stuff, but man, that was mighty interesting. Yeah, mighty interesting. Okay then, well, yeah, we really had a lot of great stuff to cover today. Some really interesting battle, the biggest name really coming into play, Kenshin, Shingen, and Oda Nobunaga. We're really in the thick of it, and yet it's already been like 80 years into it, right? Quite a busy period, that's for sure. Really makes me want to play some Sengoku Jidai game right now. I don't know what I'll play. my mind is split between many choices. But yeah, really enjoyed it. We might do another one this week. Yeah, maybe later this week, we'll see. But yeah, I'll stop it at this part for today. That was a good amount of history. I enjoyed it. Hope you guys enjoyed the reaction. Once again, check out the videos with the link in the description to the playlist with all the videos from the Shogunate. Tomorrow I'm doing some Conan. Like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you guys next time. ExoticBankai. See you.